Welcome, Feliz Cinco de Mayo. It is Cinco de Mayo, and we have a really special show lined up today. So for all of our Latino brothers and sisters, Feliz Cinco de Mayo. And for all of our friends that like tacos and margaritas, hey, happy Cinco de Mayo. And yesterday was Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. And I'd like to quote something from Princess Leia, actually the actress who played her, Carrie Fisher. She said something very profound, which is very fitting for this show. Stay afraid, but do it anyway. What's important is the action. You don't have to wait to be confident. Just do it, and eventually the confidence will follow. I think that's good advice for everyone. And I'm Mark Anthony, and welcome to Transformation Talk Radio's The Psychic and the Doc. My amazing co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili, the street smart spiritual behavioral psychologist, will be back next week. So this week, you got the Psychic and the Rock, my co-host, Rocky Trainer. Hey, Rocky, how you doing?
I am doing quite well. I'm in Key Largo right now. So hello, all concrete public that I told about this wonderful show. I hope you're tuning in. And go ahead, take it away, Mark.
Oh my gosh, so she's in the Florida Keys. Let me tell you, there's worse places to be in May, that's for sure. But you know, Rocky, we got a really special guest tonight, don't we?
Oh, I know, I'm quite excited. I had the pleasure of meeting her before, and I'm so happy that she is here. She is just an amazing person, and I know you have a wonderful introduction for her.
Yeah, let me give a little,
a
little bit of background. Our guest is Yvonne Kason, and Dr. Yvonne Kason, and she's the president past president of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Experiences. And not only that, but she's had 5 near-death experiences, 2 in childhood and 3 in her adult life. And Dr. Kason is the founder of Spiritual Awakenings International, which is an amazing global nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about all types of spiritually transformative experiences, which is a very important term she's going to tell us about. Dr. Kason has published 5 books, her most recent, Touched by the Light, exploring spiritually transformative experiences. She's had hundreds of professional public presentations, given scores of media interviews. She's in demand as a keynote speaker, and Dr. Kason was recently interviewed on the Dr. Oz Show and on Coast to Coast. So welcome to the Psychic and the Rock, the Psychic and the Doc, our good friend, Dr. Yvonne Kason. It's good to have you here, Yvonne.
Hi, Mark and Rocky. It's great to be here. You forgot to mention in that long list of things that I'm the current president of Spiritual Awakenings International.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. So, Yvonne, do you hold any present positions?
Why, yes, I do. I am the president of Spiritual Awakenings International, and it's just a joy to do that. That's a US-based nonprofit corporation, and our mission is to raise awareness globally. So although we're US based, our audience is global, right, about the whole spectrum of spiritually transformative experiences people are having, including near-death experiences. But near-death experiences is only one of the types.
Hold on, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
So all right, this Spiritual Awakenings International, SAI for short, has a very special event coming up next month, doesn't it?
That is true. We are really delighted to be holding our very second international conference, and it's going to be on Saturday, June 11th and Sunday, June 12th. And it's online and it's free. We're requesting donations if you have it in your ability, but it's free to register. And we have 30 international speakers from 12 different countries around the world. And one of our speakers is you, Mark Anthony. So we're delighted that you're going to be one of our speakers at our upcoming conference.
Well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm very honored to be part of that. And Rocky, she's my manager and producer of this show, and we've traveled to several conferences. And I remember meeting you at IANS. Do you remember that, Rocky?
Oh, I sure do. I was quite impressed with everything that you presented to the entire audience, and to find out that you have experienced near death more than once, it flabbergasted me. Just
Yeah,
totally.
5 times.
I want to get into that, but I want you, Dr. Kason, to tell our audience, what do you mean by and what is a spiritually transformative experience?
Okay, thanks for asking, Mark. Spiritually transformative experiences, that is or STEs for short. that is a term that I coined back in 1994, and at first nobody heard of it, but now it's catching on, so a lot of people are starting to use it. And what it is, it's an umbrella term. So it's an umbrella term that encompasses a really, really broad range of spiritual and paranormal experiences that people are having today. And in fact, they've been having it for forever, for millennia. But it does include near-death experiences, but it includes many other types of experiences, such as mystical experiences, spiritual energy, or what in yoga is called Kundalini awakenings, inspired creativity, or what some people call downloads, and all sorts of psychic and intuitive experiences like clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, transdimensional experiences, mediumship, channeling, out-of-body experiences, so that all of that fits under the umbrella of spiritually transformative experiences.
So this is kind of the technical term for what a lot of people call an aha moment.
Well, I would call it an aha moment, one including under it, and the reason I coined the phrase, I don't know if you're going to ask me that next, but the reason I coined the phrase was
Intuitive.
I'm reading your mind. Yes, I am intuitive. Is that I started having experiences myself. I'm a medical doctor, as you said, and I used to be on faculty at the University of Toronto. And when I was in medical school and I started meditating, I had this really powerful experience in my meditation, which I now know was a Kundalini awakening with a mystical experience. But of course, in medical school in Canada, I had traditional medical training. It's like, what on earth just happened to me? And I didn't even have a word, in my vocabulary, and what I was learning in medical school to even call it, And then when I was a medical resident, in my residency, again in Canada, in Toronto, Canada, I was sent on a medevac and in Northern Ontario, and there was a plane crash. A medevac plane crash in which I almost died. I can tell you the story in more detail if you want, but I'm just bottom line, I had what I now know was an out-of-body type of near-death experience. Wow. And where I went out of body, and well, basically, what happened, I was on this medevac and with a critically ill patient, and it was a propeller airplane, not one of these fancy helicopter medevacs. And we flew into bad weather. In Canada in the winter, we have bad weather. So we flew into a snowstorm, and they say the air filters of the two propeller engines froze over, one than the other. So obviously we had no propellers, and we started going down to the ground, and it was like really bad turbulence. And my immediate reaction was intense fear and panic. I think anybody was, and it literally jumped out of my heart. The thought, it was, oh God, I'm going to die. And I didn't say it out loud. It just sort of jumped out of my heart. And at that instant, it was actually before the plane crashed, was when my near-death experience began, because all of a sudden I felt this like force field of peace descending upon me. And it was like it was pushing down all of my fear. And then I heard an inner voice. And before this time, I'd never heard inner voices. And I heard an inner voice say, "Be still and know that I am God. I am with you now and always." And the vibration that came with those words was so powerful. It just calmed me right down. And I felt, it's hard to explain, but somehow I felt totally peaceful, totally unafraid, whether I'd live or die. Anyway, the pilot managed to get it down onto the surface of a semi-frozen lake without crashing into trees, which was quite a heroic miracle. But then as soon as the plane came to a stop, it broke through the thin ice, nosedived, and went down into very deep water.
Okay, hold that thought, because I can't think of a better cliffhanger before our first break. And everyone, you're listening to The Psychic and the Doc with our special guest, Yvonne Kason, and special co-host, Rocky Trainer. We'll be back in just a minute. I'm Mark Anthony, and you're listening to Transformation Network's The Psychic and the Doc. I have to admit, even though, I always rooted for the Jedi Knights and the light side of the Force, the dark side really had the better music, don't you think?
I like the music on both sides.
Anyway, so Yvonne, you left us with a cliffhanger that just prior to the plane, the medevac plane that you were in crashing, and you had this intense, serene sensation. Your NDE occurred before impact. Take us back to that moment.
Well, as I mentioned, the voice that came with it as well, that reading scripture, stating scripture, that put me in this deep sort of semi-mystical state of peace and calm. Anyway, when the plane came to a stop, it was on the surface of a semi-frozen lake. It quickly nosedived and sank into very deep water. And I had to very rapidly get out of the plane as it was sinking. I tried to save the patient. Unfortunately, I was not able to pull her out of the plane.
Oh,
she went down.
I'm sorry.
The pilot got out himself. They say I pulled the nurse out. Anyway, we were in open water with very thin ice. The ice was not strong enough to support us. So in order to get to safety, I had to swim this long distance. They estimate about 200 yards in open water to the closest land. And the place that we had crashed is called Devil's Gap.
Oh my God.
How's that for a coincidence? And the reason it's called Devil's Gap is because of the really strong current. So the water is treacherous in the summer, and the winter, the ice never freezes. So I had to actually swim the Devil's Gap with that strong current and get to the closest land, which was an island. And I was wearing like heavy winter clothes and boots. So you're in Florida, so you don't know what it's like. Maybe you've been up in the cold north, but you wear parkas and you wear boots and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm trying to swim a long distance in ice cold water with a strong current in a blizzard while you're wearing heavy clothes that are weighing you down like lead weights. It was a really, really difficult swim. And I went under several times.
Wow.
And somewhere in the process of swimming to shore is when my near-death experience changed, or in the research field, we say deepened. And what happened was, all of a sudden, I heard this loud sort of roaring noise, like the roar of a waterfall. It's like, and all of a sudden I found my consciousness lift up out of my body, and it didn't seem like my point of perception was in my body anymore. But it's more complicated than that, because I wasn't dead. I was still swimming to shore. So actually what it was like my consciousness was in two places at the same time. And it was like a split screen TV where most of my consciousness is like the big image, and it was up out of my body. And a little bit like the little image in the split screen TV was still in my body, that was still like desperately struggling to swim to shore.
Wow.
And then the main part of my consciousness rose even higher. And I went into this realm that was filled with love and filled with light. And I felt the most powerful, beautiful, perfect, unconditional love that I've ever felt in my life. And in that experience or state of consciousness, whatever we're going to call it, I suddenly knew things. I visually, I saw a face of light for a second, and then it disappeared into the cloud-like periphery. But there was
Wow.
there was nobody like talking to me or explaining things or anything, but I just somehow knew things. And
Wow.
what I knew when I was in this realm of love and light is I knew somehow in my soul, don't ask me how I knew, but I knew that what I was experiencing was the love of the higher power, the profound love of the higher power, or what I was raised to call God. And
Right.
what I was experiencing God to be was not at all like I was taught God was supposedly like, right? It was not an old man with a long white beard sitting on a throne judging me of good and good and that. That was not what I was experiencing at all. What I was experiencing God or the higher power to be was like the force in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Wow.
Was like
So,
an infinite force field
Go
of
ahead, Rocky.
love that
so
interpenetrates all creation.
wow, that's just an amazing story. And so, where did spiritually transformative experience come from? STE. How did that come about?
How did that come about? Well, that came out a little bit later. Let me just, if I may, complete the body, how I
Oh,
got
I'm
back in
sorry.
my
Sorry.
body, etc.
Sure,
Anyway, if
sure,
I may,
please.
so I stayed in this realm of love and light until my body was rescued. I managed to swim to shore. There's a whole bunch of so-called coincidences and miracles that I was able to swim to shore, and that there happened to be a helicopter around that day that happened to be nearby and was able to rescue us, because that's the only possible vehicle that could have gotten anywhere close to where we'd swum to, because we swum to an island. Anyway, I was taken by helicopter, taken to the closest hospital, and then I was freezing. I could see my body lying on the emergency room table, and they were trying to take my temperature, and they couldn't get a reading on the thermometer. They were puzzled because I was hypothermic. I was colder than the bottom of the thermometer. And I was floating further and further away from my body, and I knew I was dying, and I was okay, because another thing that I knew when I was in the light was that what I think of as me will live on after my physical body dies, and that there's
So,
absolutely nothing to be afraid of.
so you were comfortable in this space
Oh
that
yeah,
you went into
it,
in this consciousness.
more
That's amazing.
more than
Wow.
comfortable. I was home. I was completely content. I was in complete joy. I was in complete peace. And so I was ready to just, let the body go. But then all of a sudden out of my body came these words, boy, could I use a hot bath. And I was really surprised, because like it came out of my physical body, but I wasn't thinking of those words. So I have no idea my guardian angel spoke it through my body or something like that.
So Yvonne, Rocky had a question that's very important.
Well, I
Where does the
remember
term spiritually transformative experiences
I
come from?
asked.
Come to.
Yeah,
Right,
Okay.
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we need to know that, because the thing is, you created that term. So we need to know where that came from, because
Okay.
that's going to be really important to what we're going to be talking about next.
All right. So I'll get to it. So I just want to tell people that after I said that, they took us to the hot whirlpool baths of the physio department, put my body in there, and my body got reheated. And then my consciousness, it was like a genie being sucked into a bottle. That
Ah,
suddenly I was back in my body. Now,
wow.
and that's how I got back in my body. Have to get me
Wow.
back in the body for your listeners. So
Okay, good.
so after that, so this relates to your question, what are spiritually transformative experiences? Afterwards, I tried to figure out what on earth had just happened to me. I was a young doctor. I was finishing my residency. So I went and I talked with all my doctor friends, and I said, have you ever heard of anything like this? What could this possibly be? And so all my doctor friends called it a hallucination, basically. Oh, it must have been a hallucination because of low blood sugar and electrolyte imbalance. And I just knew in my heart, no, this is not a hallucination. And I was searching for a word to call this experience.
Ah,
So now we're heading in the directions of how I came to spiritually transformative experiences. So as I searched for a word, at first in the early years, the best word I was able to find for my experience was a mystical experience. because back then they used to think that you had to be clinically dead in order for it to be a near-death experience. Well, I've never actually been fully dead. So I thought, well, if it's not a near-death experience, what is it? So, well, we had an out-of-body experience. We had a mystical experience. It wasn't a near-death experience, but I was researching near-death experiences. I also had an experience in medical school that I told you I now realize was a Kundalini awakening. So I started researching privately outside of my medical practice all the broad spectrum of experiences, near-death experiences, mystical experiences, out-of-body and psychic experiences, Kundalini awakenings. And back then in the 70s, and actually even to today, it's really true. Many groups and organizations are very focused just on one type of experience. You know, like some groups are only looking at Kundalini, and some groups were only looking at near-death experiences, and some groups were only looking at a certain type of psychic phenomenon. And it seemed to me they must all be connected in some way, because guess what? They're all happening to me. So there must be some sort of connection. And so I thought, you know, we need to have a non-pathological name. Calling it a hallucination is like dismissing everything mystical and spiritual that's happened since the beginning of man, right? And so we need to have a current vocabulary that would be non-pathological to call this whole array of experiences that I think are part of this global spiritual awakening that's happening. And so the inspiration came to me to create this umbrella term, spiritually transformative experiences.
Perfect. Wow. What a great way for us to go to our next break. That is amazing, because when we come back, we're going to talk about a conference that Spiritual Awakenings International is going to be hosting in an online free conference in June. And Yvonne, how can people get hold of Spiritual Awakenings International? How can they get hold of you?
Website, please.
Yes, the Spiritual Awakenings International website, www.spiritualawakenings.org. That's spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. And you can find out about all of our events. You can contact me, and we have a great conference website page there, and you can sign up and register. It's free, but you need to register in order to attend, to get our Zoom link.
Fantastic, fantastic. And for all of those listening on the Transformation Network, we will be back in just a moment.
Welcome back to a Spiritually Transformative Cinco de Mayo show. And we've got the expert on spiritually transformative experiences. In fact, not only the person who is the world's foremost expert on spiritually transformative experiences, but the doctor who coined the term. And Rocky, you've had a number of STEs yourself. I recall that you had a near-death experience not all that long ago.
Yes, that's why my voice has changed. I was in for a routine procedure, given too many meds, and I went into cardiac arrest. And while I was there, I was laughing to myself going, oh, this can't possibly be an NDE. It's because I've been around you, Mark, and Yvonne, and so many people. I thought, oh, this could be a dream. But I found myself in an amazing garden, and beyond the garden were these beautiful trees. And beyond that, a chorus of voices speaking with me. And every time I walked towards these incredible flowers, it kept on saying to me in a chorus, don't step forward, it's not your time yet. And then I left and I go, oh, really? Is this a NDE? This can't be an MDE. This must be really good meds you gave me for my procedure. And then it says, don't step forward. And then I basically floated and saw amazing foliage. And then the next minute, there I was, on this operating table, and everybody was like so happy.
Right.
It
And
was,
you said that, your voice was damaged. And what happened was when she went into cardiac arrest, they had to put an intubation tube down her throat, and they put the wrong size, and it damaged her vocal cords.
all my vocal
Um,
cords.
yeah, so
Yes.
that's
I had
why,
a, I
and Rocky has always had a beautiful singing voice. I mean, she could do a
five,
great rendition now of Old Man River, but
yes.
hitting those
I had a
um
5.5 octave
yeah,
voice.
five and a
I
half
had a
octave voice.
coloratura voice. I
Yeah,
could sing
so
almost anything. Yeah,
but
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 no
she
longer.
yeah, but she had a spiritually transformative experience. And
Yes.
Dr. Kason, I know that your STEs, which you've had every type, have let you realize that this is your life's work. And so how did that lead to you forming Spiritual Awakenings International? And then, I want to get into talking a little bit about the upcoming conference.
Mhm. Well, basically, one of the things that happens to people who've had STEs of pretty well any type is they become more intuitive. And a lot of people get that spiritual guidance that comes in various forms. And so a term is downloads, where you get a sudden download of a whole bunch of information guidance. So I get lots of downloads. Okay. So it was, I remember it was in July of 2019. I was having a conversation with Robert Baer, and this was because we had both been nominated for actually IAN's president and vice president. We thought, let's see if we're compatible in our thinking to be teammates, or, as running slate mates. And he, as soon as we started talking, he's a multiple ND and STE or two. He got a download, and he says, Yvonne, I just got a download. I think we're supposed to found a different organization together. And so my reaction was, well, okay, whatever. I have to meditate about this and think about this. So I got off the phone and I went into meditation, and boom, I got a download, like a really strong download. And it was, yes, you two are to found a new organization, and that organization will be called Spiritual Awakenings International. So I was given the name. Robert was the first one to get the idea, and then I got yes, and that this was the name. And
Wow.
so we knew that we were being called by Spirit to found this organization. We didn't know how, when, or whatever. We waited for the inner guidance of when to do it, and we got the inner guidance.
Wow.
And we launched. I was given the exact date. I remember Robert said to me, we can't be ready that fast, but I was given the date. June 15th, 2020 was the day that we were to publicly launch. And so, I mean, I worked, you could see the smoke rising from my head. I worked so hard to get our website ready and everything ready in order to launch. But we launched on June 15th, 2020, because that was our guidance from Spirit. And the mission was to raise awareness and promote networking worldwide about the whole spectrum of spiritually transformative.
So within 2 years, how many members, how many countries is Spiritual Awakenings touched?
Well, Spiritual Awakenings International has exploded, which I think reflects that there really is a global spiritual awakening happening all over the world. We have subscribers in 65 countries on every continent except Antarctica. We're still waiting for those penguin researchers, but and what I want to share is our most recent country, because this really touched my heart on a deep level. We're always keeping track of if we have new countries joining us. Our most recent country is the Ukraine.
Oh.
And within the last couple of weeks, we've had 3 new people from the Ukraine. And so it's like, oh my God, Spirit works in strange and wonderful ways. Maybe people are turning to Spirit because they're in life-threatening situations. Maybe they're having STEs because they're in life-threatening situations. I don't know, but I'm just really glad that they found their way to Spiritual Awakenings International.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so on the 2nd anniversary, you're
correct.
having a conference. Can you tell us about the conference?
Absolutely. Well, we're having an online conference, and we have 30 speakers from around the world, from 12 different countries. And we're absolutely delighted that you, Mark Anthony, are going to be one of our speakers at the conference. I'm also going to be speaking at the conference. We're going to have a vast array of topics, everything from end-of-life experiences to after-death communications, to childhood near-death experiences, to spiritual emergencies, to we're having several experiencers panels, people who want to share the stories, the interesting stories of their experiences. And I'm really happy that Betty Eady is going to be one of our speakers. I don't know if you've ever had her on your show.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, maybe after the conference or before the conference. But she, as you may know, she's of Native American Indian background, and she was probably the first person to write a national bestseller on near-death experiences, because it came out in the late 70s, early 80s, and her book Embraced by the Light is like been a bestseller all over the world and translated into something like 30 languages. But it was not easy back then being a groundbreaker. I mean, she met with a lot of resistance. She and Danny and Brinkley were really the two that people that came public and were icebreakers to raise awareness. And I had the good fortune of meeting both of these people back in the 90s, because the media was just beginning to pick up on this topic of near-death experiences in the early 90s. And they were invited to come to Canada. And so, of course, the Canadian producers said, gee, we really need some Canadian content. Is there any Canadian NDE experiencer? And it's like, I was like the only one that was public at that time. And so the three of us were at this symposium on near-death experiences. And that actually was great, instrumental in me coming out of the closet about my NDEs.
Well, speaking of which, that also made you the first Canadian medical doctor to specialize your practice in the research and counseling of patients who've had different types of STEs. So what made you decide to do that?
Well, when I first had my experiences, I told you about in medical school, my Kundalini awakening, my near-death experience when I was a resident that I thought was a mystical experience, which it was as well. When I tried to speak with people, I didn't get any validation. So I basically went into the closet. So I was a closet mystic. I was practicing regular traditional medicine on the outside. And I was in the closet about my spiritual search and research and being a mystic and having all sorts of experiences. Then in 1990, I had another powerful STE, what I call my calling mystical experience. And I write about this in my book. I talk about all of these experiences in my book, Touched by the Light. And this calling mystical experience, it was even more powerful than a download. It was a massive download, but with a profound mystical experience. And I knew that I was being called, that it was like my mission to come out of the closet and to advocate for experiencers so that the medical profession and the public would stop calling STE experiencers crazy. So I came back, talked to my department chairman, and that is when I specialized my practice, became the first medical doctor in Canada to specialize my practice in the counseling and research of STE experiencers.
That's fantastic. So all you Canadians out there, you know who to call. She's close by.
Retired.
That's right.
I'm
retired now.
Toronto's a very cosmopolitan city, and I'm sure very interesting people would love to meet you and go to you if they've had these experiences.
Unfortunately, I've retired from medical practice, but where they'll find me is online at spiritualawakeningsinternational.org.
Oh, she's good. Yeah. And everybody, please check out Spiritual Awakenings with an S, international.org, so that you can find out about this upcoming conference, because Dr. Kason insists that membership is free, and certainly they are accepting donations, because people think, oh, it's a free organization, right? But people still have to work for it. They still have to have a website. They still have to do promotion, and everybody expects those of us in the spiritual field to do everything from free. And it's like, yes, but the bank doesn't give us free mortgages, do they?
Everything
And we don't
costs
get
money.
free electricity, free internet, free anything.
Mhm.
So, and also because it is a nonprofit organization, your contributions are tax deductible.
That's right.
So,
Also, I'd like to ask Dr. Kason, what is the link for the conference, and for someone on Facebook asked us this. They asked us if you could give the link one more time.
Okay. All right. It's just go to our website, www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. And once you get to our website, you'll see that we have on the menu there, you can pick the conference and then you're there.
Great. Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
fantastic.
Because our Facebook is popping off questions left and right. So I
Well,
want to make sure
yeah.
I did that right.
Yeah, and because this conference is great because it's going to be covering a wide array of STEs, spiritually transformative experiences. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, you can call it an enlightenment experience, an aha moment, or the what the heck was that? And Dr. Kason is the world's foremost expert on STEs, and that's why she's been guided by the divine to create this amazing organization, which is having this conference. And I know I'm very honored to be one of the speakers with this because, Yvonne and I, we realize that our life's work is to help people understand that physical death is not the end of our existence, and that the spiritual, as I like to say in my book, The Afterlife Frequency, nothing is paranormal or supernatural. It's merely a natural part of normal life.
That's right. That's right. And how can people get your book?
Okay, and I just want to add, I say paranormal is the new normal.
It really is. Well, I mean, look at all the TV shows, it'd be nice if some of them were a bit more highbrow, but hey, they're out there, there.
And my book is called Touched by the Light. It's available on Amazon and both in print or in ebook format. So Touched by the Light, Exploring Spiritually Transformative Experiences.
And before we go off the air, Mark Anthony, how do we get your book? And tell us your website.
At afterlifefrequency.com, which is the same title as my book, The Afterlife Frequency. And I've been very, very honored because my book does go into quite a bit about spiritually transformative experiences, because I cover all the different forms of spirit contact. We're going to go ahead and skip our next break. We're just going to go till the top of the hour because I think that this is just too interesting a topic to take a break from. And Yvonne, so you were the first Canadian doctor to start gearing your practice towards helping people process their spiritually transformative experiences. And that was back in 1990.
That is correct.
Yeah. So how did your colleagues in the medical profession respond to that?
Well, there were numbers of raised eyebrows, and there were definitely hurdles that I had to cross. And that, like, for example, the malpractice insurance said, how is this insurable? How can we insure you? How does this fall within the practice of medicine? And so did our licensing body. Is like, wow, please explain how this falls within the practice of medicine. And so I did. I prayed and meditated about it, and I responded to the best of my capacity, and they accepted my responses. I basically said that this is a new and emerging specialty. The American Psychological Association had just recognized spiritual experiences as something that exists. And I said, there's nobody else that is specializing in this. So I'm actually doing a service by being the first doctor in Canada to specialize in this. Well, anyway, through the grace of God, or the words perhaps that were given to me, they accepted that. And so I moved forward with it. The other thing that really helped was that the public were getting interested in it. So I told you about Betty Eady and Dannion Brinkley.
Right.
And there started being TV shows, and well, they were doing talk shows in the United States. So I started getting invited on talk shows in Canada. So actually throughout the 90s, it was the talk shows and the media and the press. They all wanted to interview. They wanted to do a profile piece on me. And so I had developed this big public profile. And so the medical profession, I would say, tolerated me.
Oh, don't say that. You're a great guest. You're a great guest.
Well, I remember when I was practicing personal injury law, it had taken years for chiropractic treatment to be accepted by the medical community and covered by insurance. And then acupuncture, back in like the 70s and the 80s, chiropractic treatment was looked at as voodoo medicine. Acupuncture, you may have well has been boiling chickens at midnight and dancing around a fire, but now they are seen as legitimate and very, very beneficial forms of treatment. And so when it comes to psychic traumas,
or
spiritual traumas, it takes time for this to be accepted. And, now when you see in the New England Journal of Medicine articles about near-death experiences, the paradigm has shifted. These things are real. And the benefit of living in the 21st century is that we now have the scientific capability to begin analyzing these phenomena. And so, it's really quite an honor to have you here as one of the pioneers in this field.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The other thing I want to throw in is that to give doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals the credit that is due, but they were also witnessing these phenomena. They were having people tell them about near-death experiences. Another thing people were talking about was end-of-life experiences, that happened before people die, where they're talking with spirits on the other side, and then the related phenomena after death communications. And these were both happening to doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, and they were witnessing it. So then what started happening is that I started getting invited to speak to groups, particularly palliative care groups, etc. They wanted to know about it because guess what? They were seeing it in their patients. And so by me giving them a vocabulary, it became okay to start talking about it.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Well, that's very important because, whenever anything is a new phenomenon, certainly near-death experiences where people die and their consciousness separates from the body. You gave a perfect example at the beginning of the show of an NDE. And they've been around for thousands of years. And then Dr. Raymond Moody, and you know him and I know him, and we've both been on his program, and he coined the term near-death experience in the 1970s. Okay, so these type of phenomenon, they need, and you termed, spiritually transformative experience. I termed electromagnetic soul, because we now need to take these spiritual phenomenon, observe it objectively through the scientific method, and then give it terminology, which brings it into the 21st century. And so it's very, very important for us to do these things so that people can understand them. What Dr. Kason, what you're talking about is not voodoo or magic. These are legitimate experiences which can be explained scientifically and medically. Let me ask you this. With an STE, a spiritually transformative experience, a lot of people think this sitting on a mountaintop and all of a sudden, and the rays from heaven, they can be very traumatic, can't they?
They can, but that is a type of STE. But, STEs can be traumatic for a number of reasons. Okay. They can be traumatic because you are confused. You don't know what's happening to you. You wonder if you're going crazy. You're afraid to tell people. And maybe if you try telling people, they minimize you or pathologize you, say that's crazy, you're hallucinating. And I mean, I've heard horror stories. People go to their church pastor or whatever, and they're told this is work of the devil. They go to their doctor. They're said, oh, you need to go on medication. And so it's pathologized. And just that pathologizing and not knowing what it is can be very traumatic.
Yes.
And so that's a big part of the mission of Spiritual Awakenings International, and also my books, where I outline and I give case examples of all the different kinds of STEs. They have a name, they're normal, they've been around for thousands of years. And just because people don't know about it doesn't mean they're crazy. They're very, very real. And so that's one of the ways. But the other thing is that there are after effects, and that can also be really challenging. Like, for example, your worldview might completely change. And
Right.
if you're with in an environment with friends or family that have a, let's say, worldview A, without labeling it, but now after you've had your experience, your worldview has shifted. Like with me, after my NDE and the plane crash, all of a sudden I could see the oneness of all religions, and I became extremely tolerant of people with divergent religious beliefs. Now, my certain relatives of mine happen to be very fundamentalistic in their religious beliefs. So this creates a problem because you're changed, right? And that you might get into conflicts with your family or even in your marriage. The other thing I do want to mention is that some people actually have traumatic STEs that, for example, with near-death experiences, there's a small percentage of people that have what we label a distressing near-death experience. It isn't always love and light. Sometimes it's distressing. And similarly, other STEs, another one that can be distressing is past life recall.
Yes.
Is that sometimes people will start popping into past life memories, and we tend to remember traumas from the past. And so, so now we're not only dealing with traumas in the current lifetime, but oh my goodness, now I'm trying to integrate and heal traumas from a past life, and I can't even talk to anybody about it.
And we're going to have to hold it there, because let me tell you something, bringing you back to talk about dealing with the other side, if you will, of STEs is going to be a great show topic. So for everybody, spiritualawakeningsinternational.org is how to find out about the upcoming conference in June, the SAI's annual conference. We're going to have speakers from over 12 different countries, and
including Mark.
including me, and including our esteemed guest, Dr. Yvonne Kason. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Psychic and the Doc. We will be back next week. We're here every Thursday. And my great co-host, Dr. Pat Baccili, I know she was upset that she couldn't make the show because she really wanted to interview you. So this week we had the Psychic and the Rock, but next week we'll be back with the Psychic and the Doc. And for everyone out there who is celebrating Cinco de Mayo, look, I was a DUI defense attorney. Don't drink and drive. And if you do, call an Uber, call a taxi, call a Lyft, because we want to communicate with the other side, not go there, and certainly not send anybody there. So I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Psychic and the Doc on Transformation Network, and we'll be back next week. Thank you all.
Love and light, everyone.
Night.
Love.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on the Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.